fellow Americans.
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, who believe in open borders, who weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents, and above all, who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war. Now, I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not. Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite. Now, I'm calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party. If you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country, then I invite you to join me.
The Vietnam War and the push for US involvement was a result of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. A lie. The Iraq War famously is a result of lies. Wars in Somalia are a result of lies. The Second World War and the German invasion of Poland was a result of carefully constructed lies. That is war by media. Let us ask ourselves, of the complicit media, which is the majority of the mainstream press, what is the average death count attributed to each journalist?
me ask you a question. Do you think you should be the one to be able to decide when to pull the trigger?
No, sir.
Isn't that what this is about? If you adopt the position that any time you are denied, your particular, there's 4 groups out there of inspectors, you're the group you headed, anytime you are denied, that ipso facto requires the United States and the Security Council to act on what they said they would do, which is to use whatever means necessary to take on Saddam Hussein so you can get into that particular facility. Is that not correct? Is that not your position?
Mr. Senator, I have a job to do, or I had a job to do, and that was to disarm Iraq in accordance with the provisions
No,
of
I got
relevant
that.
resolutions.
With all due respect, I'm not trying to be confrontational. I'm trying to get this as clear as I can. I really mean this now. You have an absolute logic. You put together a very tight syllogism here. You've indicated that your job is to disarm. The only way you can disarm is to have access. The only way you can have access is either with permission on the part of Iraq, or if denied, forced access, right?
Compelled access.
Compel. Well, okay, compel. You sound like the lawyer and I sound like the military guy. I mean, compelled, where I come from, when my old man said you're compelled, it meant I was forced. I mean, it was a real simple proposition. It wasn't much to debate. Now, there is a clear logic to that. And that's what I mean when I say I respect your position. But that means that whenever you choose a target that warrants inspection and you are denied, that ipso facto, at that moment, the only way your position can be satisfied or sustained is if the UN Security Council or the United States, acting unilaterally, uses force to guarantee access. Is not that true?
Yes, sir.
Now, that means that you get to choose the time and place when we would use force, if we use force.
No, sir.
Of course you do. If you choose the site and it's denied.
And we coordinate with the member states to include the United States.
Exactly.
And prior to us going in, we have their agreement that this indeed is an inspection worth doing.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the president now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the majors. The majors' assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the president have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone, or to take the nation to war partway, or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip, because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector, you didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let them in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Scott, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
Rationality belongs to the cool observers, but because of the stupidity of the average man, he follows not reason but faith, and the naive faith of the proletarian requires necessary illusion and emotionally potent oversimplifications, which have to be provided by myth makers to keep the ordinary person on the right course.
That I'm allowed to ask you this question is because today the federal court ruled that the government doesn't have the right to determine who is or is not a journalist. This is the second election in a row that the court had to overturn your government. Do you still insist on being able to make that decision, and why?
First of all, questions around accreditation were handled by the Press Gallery and the consortium of networks who have strong perspectives on quality journalism and the important information that is shared with Canadians. The reality is organizations like yours that continue to spread misinformation and disinformation on the science around vaccines, around how we're going to actually get through this pandemic and be there for each other and keep our kids safe, is part of why we're seeing such unfortunate anger and lack of understanding of basic science. And quite frankly, I won't call it a media organization, your group of individuals need to take accountability for some of the polarization that we're seeing in this country. And I think Canadians are cluing into the fact that there is a really important decision we take about the kind of country we want to see. And I salute all extraordinary, hardworking journalists that put science and facts at the heart of what they do and ask me tough questions every day, but make sure that they are educating and informing Canadians from a broad range of perspectives, which is the last thing that you guys do.
Killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed 1 million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war
George,
after
if
what
I
you've
was
already
still in
done.
Parliament...
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be on the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean with the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Dr. Fauci, knowing that it is a crime to lie to Congress, do you wish to retract your statement of May 11th where you claimed that the NIH never funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement. This paper that you are referring to was judged by qualified staff up and down the chain as not being gain of function. Let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans,
right.
You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly. And I want to say that officially. You do not know what you are talking about. Okay, you get one person.
Let's read from the NIH definition of gain of function. This is your definition that you guys wrote. It says that scientific research that increases the transmissibility among animals is gain of function. They took animal viruses that only occur in animals and they increased their transmissibility to humans. How you can say that is not gain of function?
It is not.
It's a dance, and you're dancing around this because you're trying to obscure responsibility for 4 million people dying around the world from a pandemic.
And let's let Dr. Fauci.
I have to, well, now you're getting into something. If the point that you are making is that the grant that was funded as a sub-award from EcoHealth to Wuhan created SARS-CoV-2. That's where you are getting. Let me finish.
We don't know.
Well, wait a minute.
If it did come from the lab, but all the evidence is pointing that it came from the lab, and there will be responsibility for those who funded the lab, including yourself.
I totally
This committee will allow the witness to respond.
I totally resent the lie that you are now propagating, Senator, because if you look at the viruses that were used in the experiments, that were given in the annual reports, that were published in the literature, it is molecularly impossible.
No one's saying those viruses caused it.
No one is molecularly.
Those viruses caused the pandemic. What we're alleging is that gain-of-function research was going on in that lab, and NIH funded it.
That is
you can't
not.
Get away from it. It meets your definition, and you are obfuscating the truth.
I'm not obfuscating the truth.
Senator
You are the
Paul's
one.
time is expired, but I will allow the witness to.
Let me just finish. I want everyone to understand that if you look at those viruses, and that's judged by qualified virologists and evolutionary biologists, those viruses are molecularly impossible to result
No
in
one's saying those viruses
SARS-CoV-2.
caused the pandemic.
Senator Paul,
We're saying they are gain-of-function viruses because they were animal viruses that became more transmissible in human, and you funded it.
And you
won't admit the truth.
And you implying...
Paul, your time has expired, and I will allow witnesses who come before this committee to respond.
And you are implying that what we did was responsible for the deaths of individuals. I totally resent that. And if anybody is lying here, Senator, it is you.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Hey everybody, welcome into Redacted on this Thursday. I can't believe we're almost at the end of the week. I'm Clayton Morris, so glad to have you here. On this show, we seek the truth wherever it may lead us. We have no agenda other than we are anti-war and we are anti-globalist. So maybe that is a pretty big agenda, actually. And we're also anti-corporate media. So welcome into the show. I spent, for those of you who don't know me, I spent, 20 years, I guess, in the mainstream media, the last 10 years as a news anchor at Fox News Channel, and decided to leave the world of the corporate media and go off on my own. And we get to do this show every night live at 4 p.m. Eastern time. So welcome. My co-host, Natalie, and my wife, is off this week. She's traveling. So you got me. just solo time here at the Redacted headquarters. And you've got Philip, you've got David, you've got Grim, you've got Kevin, you've got the whole enchilada, you've got the whole men. It's the men group tonight. It's Testosterone Thursday. So
Sausage Fest, we call it.
It's the full Monty.
It's the full Monty. It's the full Monty sausage. Good to see all of you guys. Welcome, welcome. We've got a very busy show for you because the news doesn't stop, apparently. Like when you think it might, no, there's always news. I was thinking back to, do you guys remember the days of like Gary Condit? That was like the only story all summer long, Gary Condit. And then suddenly 9/11
What was that?
Gary Condit and what was her name? The intern in Washington ruined his life, of course. What was her name? She went missing, and there was all the question as a congressman, was it his fault? Of course, it wasn't, but it ruined his life as a result. Really pretty devastating. Anyway, that was the only story like all summer. And then, of course, 9/11 happened, and everything has changed. So we've not really had quiet news days in a very, very long time since the United States has decided to meddle around the world in random wars on a regular basis. Tonight on the show, though, we're going to talk about the war a little bit later. Scott Ritter is going to be joining us because of all of these tanks that are being sent to Ukraine. What does that look like from a weapons perspective? Will this change the face of the war or further push us into World War III? We're going to look at this Pfizer bombshell. So Project Veritas, of course, got their hands on some pretty crazy footage, an undercover investigation of Pfizer. We're going to be speaking with Dr. Robert Malone, who's going to be joining us here on the show to talk about the fallout from the Pfizer story here and the mutation of viruses in order to create further profit. It's long been believed, of course, but to hear it right out of a Pfizer director's mouth, that's a whole nother thing completely. Is this just the tip of the iceberg? We're going to talk about that. Does Moderna, should they be quaking in their boots? Maybe that's the bigger story, Moderna. We're also going to look at Paul Pelosi and a judge now authorizing the release of that body cam footage. In addition to which, some shady stock deals that Paul Pelosi was involved with just a few weeks before the Department of Justice announces an antitrust investigation into Google. So how much money did he make? We'll look at that and so much more on this Thursday as Redacted starts right now. It is Hammer Time Paul Pelosi time on this Thursday. And yeah, someone needed to whack me over the head because I couldn't remember Chandra Levy. So thank you to all of my astute viewers here. You ever have that? You're just like, you know that story so well. I can't remember her name. Yeah. Chandra Levy, right? Chandra Levy. Such an awful story. And in the end, it ended up ruining his life, unfortunately. Of course, and he had nothing to do with it. But such was the case of politics on television back then. So welcome. Hope you are all doing great on this Thursday. Please remember to subscribe to the channel. We are on a mission. We are on a mission to dethrone corporate media. And last night we had about 60,000 of you watching live between YouTube and Twitter and Rumble. So 60,000 people. I don't know what like CNN gets on a nightly basis for their crap programming. And then I look at our numbers overnight. I see the millions of you that have watched. Eight. Yeah, there's 8 people that choose to watch CNN. But it is pretty humbling. It's pretty amazing to think that you guys take time out of your night. We spend most of the day putting this show together and writing the show and bringing all of these elements together. And then you sit down, we do a show, and you enjoy it and you subscribe. And that just means the world to me. It really, really does. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for subscribing to the channel and being a part of our great community here. And by the way, we do have a community. And you can become a rebel, part of the rebellion, the Redacted Rebels. For the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support what we do here. We've got some exclusive content that is going to be released over the weekend. And you get access to early content before anyone else. If you're on Rumble, you can just click that red button and join the rebellion. Again, you can become part of our member of our locals community, get access to exclusive content, early videos, special content that you won't be released anywhere else. Plus, we're going to be doing some members-only live streams, which is going to be cool. I think we're going to start that next week, David. I was thinking about that. We'll do our members-only post-show live stream, where after the show, we'll gather up and we'll just all kind of hang out for members only. So Natalie's away next week. She won't be kicking me under the table saying, you got to go to bed. So I'll be hanging out a little bit later. So we'll do
Natalie's away, so the boys shall play.
That's right. We'll hang out even longer. So all you need to do is go to redacted.inc. That's the website, not .com, redacted.inc, and then join the rebellion for as little as a cup of coffee once a month. You can support independent journalism, to be able to have on the great journalists that we have here on this show who are not tied down by any corporate billionaires. Again, redacted.inc is the place to go. Well, did Project Veritas just confirm what we've suspected all along, that Pfizer has plans to, or had plans to, manipulate the COVID-19 virus in order to continue profiting off of vaccines for years to come? Well, so some context here. Project Veritas just released what looks like a stunning admission from Pfizer's own director of research and development, a guy by the name of Jordan Tristan Walker. Take a look at this.
Pfizer ultimately is thinking about mutating COVID?
Well, that is not what we say to the public. No, don't tell anyone this. You probably shouldn't tell anyone. You probably shouldn't tell anyone. Okay? We're exploring, no, you know how the virus keeps mutating?
Yeah.
Well, one of the things we're exploring is, why don't we just mutate it ourselves so we could preemptively develop new vaccines, right? So we have to do that. If we're going to do that, though, there's a risk of, as you could imagine, no one wants to be having a pharma company mutating viruses. It would be, very controlled to make sure that this virus that you mutate doesn't create something that, goes everywhere.
Something crazy.
I suspect is the way that the virus started in Wuhan. To be honest, it makes no sense if this virus popped out of nowhere.
Yeah, I know.
Meet Jordan Tristan Walker, a director of research and development strategic operations and mRNA scientific planning at Pfizer.
It sounds like gain of function to me.
I don't know, it's a little bit different. I think it's different. It's definitely not gain of function.
It sounds like it is. I mean, it's okay.
No, directed evolution is very different. Well, you're not supposed to do gain of function research with the viruses. They recommend not. But you do these selected directional mutations to try to see if you can make it more potent.
Yeah.
So there is research ongoing about that. I don't know how that's going to work. There better not be any more outbreaks, because Jesus Christ.
Separately, Project Veritas provided Pfizer evidence that shows Jordan is who he says he is. They provided internal org chart documents showing Walker working in that role at the company, among other things, papers published. The Pfizer executive told about his company's plan for COVID vaccines while acknowledging that people would not like this information if it went public. Dr. Robert Malone is internationally recognized scientist, physician, and the original inventor of the mRNA vaccination as a technology. So he knows something about this. He was up late last night on a Twitter space talking all about this. Dr. Malone joins us now. Thanks for getting up early with us, wherever you happen to be in the world, to talk about this, Doctor. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks very much. The location at the moment is here on the farm. This is my farm studio. Looks somewhat like yours, here in Madison, Virginia, at the foothills of the Shenandoah National Park in the USA.
Well, absolutely beautiful. So thank you so much for joining us on this. I want to get into the specifics of this manipulation of the virus in a second. But before we get into the specifics, what was your initial reaction to just seeing this video and hearing this bombshell report from Project Veritas?
So I had just come back from speaking with a group in Stockholm and landed at Dulles Airport about 10 o'clock the night before. And in the early afternoon, late morning, I got pinged by Veritas asking if I would be interested in providing some comment to a drop that they had, some new expose. And they sent me a link to the embargoed video. And as I watched this, my reaction was shock. I cannot express how profoundly this impacted on me. I've been touring the world talking about the information, the government lies, and the tragedy of the vaccine injured and dead, and the gaslighting that's gone on. And then this thing drops with this gentleman casually, humorously, with absolutely no sign of empathy, describing these activities that have compounded one of the greatest human tragedies in modern history. And he has absolutely no remorse, seems to have absolutely no self-awareness. And I'm watching this. It's I've worked for larger pharma. I've worked for Bill and Melinda Gates companies. I've worked for the government. I'm familiar with some of the perverse nature of this culture and community, the sense of entitlement, et cetera. But this was all wrapped up in a package. The sense of entitlement, the hubris, it was all there in this amazing video clip of what appears to be a somewhat inebriated gentleman. I think we need to give him the benefit of the doubt that he probably was not fully sober. That certainly appears to be the case. So I think some latitude, but still, this joking acknowledgement of Pfizer having captured the entire regulatory apparatus in the United States and really globally, the willingness to just speak blithely about gain-of-function research and substitute different language for it,
right.
Directed evolution.
I want to get into that piece.
I just was stunned.
Yeah. So that piece of this, there's the gain of function piece, right? So he sort of swaps that out in this and says, it's not. He says you're not supposed to do gain of function research with viruses. He admits on camera, and he says regularly that you're not supposed to, but we can do this sort of selected structure mutations to make these viruses more potent. So as he described it, as directed evolution. So can you unpack that? What exactly does that mean that Pfizer was actively working on?
So to my eyes and ears, this is tomato. This is a euphemism. This is substitution of one word for another word that's prohibited language. This corruption of our language has been a characteristic all the way through this. It's intensely Orwellian, as I'm sure you know. In terms of the technicality, what he appears to be describing is very akin to what appeared to have been the limited hangout that was employed by Anthony Fauci when questioned on the Hill. The logic appears to be this splitting of hairs, that if one is engineering in an entirely new property, such as, for instance, a furin cleavage site, into a virus, then that would be gain of function. Or notoriously, when I was a younger faculty member at UC Davis, there was a professor who was trying to engineer a more pathogenic simian AIDS virus, and made recombinations between simian AIDS and human AIDS. And then, because that wasn't sufficiently pathogenic, started inserting human cytokines. That's clearly gain of function. By the way, this is an integral part of this culture. These folks often believe that they're entitled to do this type of work because they're the best and brightest. So what appears to be the parsing here is that the thesis that if one does targeted mutations or serial passage is where you infect one animal or one plate of cells and then take the product of that and infect another and infect another. This is more classical genetics that can be done. This is, akin to growing peas, Mendel's experiments. But in this case, serial passage it's being described as in monkeys, probably African greens. And that's also casually described, almost jokingly. This is what we do, haha. So that appears to be, basically all of this appears to be almost identical to what is believed to have been done at the Wuhan Institute of Virology in the origins, the of the laboratory strain that we call SARS-CoV-2. But in the case of the Wuhan Institute, they were using humanized mice. And in this case, apparently Pfizer is doing serial passage in African green macaques, I infer, because they're susceptible. So that the idea, the parsing here is that, well, we're not actually swapping in a whole new function. We're just mutating and modifying an existing genetic backbone. The immunologic logic that the gentleman advances is gibberish. It is nonsensical. It is grossly naive, the idea that a single epitope is what's responsible for these major changes in phenotype, like Omicron and Delta. I'm using technical terms, but what I'm trying to express is that the thesis seems to be that if we do either classical genetics or targeted genetics to modify an existing backbone, that's okay to cause that viral backbone genome to have new properties. That's okay. But inserting some new property, they're parsing that as saying, well, that's what is prohibited legally. Now, let's remember that Pfizer can do this anywhere in the world. And remember, they have a particularly tight relationship with the Israeli government. And Israel has never signed the biowarfare treaty. In Israel, it's free for all. There are no boundaries in terms of this kind of genetic modification research. Have I made it helped you understand it?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And to think then that this was, what was the collaboration? Do you get a sense of maybe what the collaboration was between what was happening then at the Wuhan Institute and Pfizer? This idea that this was being manipulated.
I'm glad you brought that up. I'm really glad you brought that up. Kim Dotcom and I don't wish to diss Mr. Dotcom. That's not my objective here. But he concluded from this presentation and this discussion that Pfizer was likely to have been somehow complicit in what happened in Wuhan and appears to be engaging in a business model in which they would intentionally release a virus. That was what I think I heard him asserting. And I just want to take a moment and distance myself from that. One of the ways I've kept out of trouble through all of this, and despite what the fact checkers say, I think I pretty well called it correctly all the way through, is I've refused to make those kinds of leaps, inferential leaps and speculations. So at this point, I think what's safe to say, and as a journalist, I'm sure you'll appreciate this, what we know is that this senior executive at Pfizer is asserting that there is both forward-looking plans being actively discussed, and then in other sections of the video, he appears to use the present and past tense, indicating that some of this work is in progress or has been in progress. He refers to the cash cow aspect of this, that it is an ideal business model to be creating pathogens and their countermeasures. But we don't have any smoking gun demonstrating that Pfizer as a corporation has directly been involved either in the Wuhan lab work or in releasing intentionally or inadvertently any of these agents that they're working on. So I think we got to be, to be responsible.
Right.
It's important that we note that, and that in no way says that they didn't do it. But right now we have no evidence other than the words from this gentleman.
Now, we might get some evidence when it comes to Congress. Congress now, the House of Representatives is now going to be pushing forward with congressional testimony, Dr. Fauci among them. Do you think that this should be part of that congressional hearings, that Pfizer should be called to answer these questions around this manipulation?
So so you ask what I think. Obviously, I feel strongly that there needs to be very aggressive investigations of the multiple agencies that have touched on this, the contracts that were issued, the bypassing of regulatory norms, and of course the activities of the contractors and subcontractors that have serviced those government contracts. Latypova makes a case that the fraud here was intentional on the part of the government, and the pharmaceutical industry delivered the fraud that the government purchased. Unpack that statement. That's consistent with the contracts. Okay. But we absolutely have to get to this. Unfortunately, Ron Johnson in the Senate is not sanguine about the ability to hold anybody accountable in D.C. The major players are very sophisticated in avoiding accountability, and I know that Matt Gaetz and his aide last night were making very strong statements about insisting on investigations and notifying the DOJ about this. But that being the Department of Justice, DC acronyms. I personally believe that it is unlikely that the American government, the American people and the world will be able to place much confidence in anything emerging out of Congress as it exists right now, and hence why I'm cautiously optimistic. Maybe I should curb that enthusiasm about the grand jury activity that is planned in the state of Florida. I do believe strongly that we need some independent, large government entity that's autonomous from the federal government, that's to be empowered to really open the books on this. In whether Governor DeSantis is the right person, I don't know that there is a perfect person here, but I'm not optimistic that we're going to get to the bottom of anything in either the House or the Senate, given the way things are.
Yeah, the Congress has very limited power in that regard, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately. Maybe in the longer run about how we know that government tends to overreach. So, but nevertheless, hopefully get some answers on this. I want to ask you, is this just the tip of the iceberg? Others are saying, well, we're being distracted from just Pfizer here.
Yes.
We need to be looking at Moderna. We need to be looking at the World Health Organization involved in this. And so the Pfizer piece of this just a small fraction, just the tip of the iceberg?
So I'm going to speculate. So I'm placing a placeholder. This is not proven. This is speculation on my part.
This is Dr. Robert Malone speculating right now. Okay. Well, let's listen.
Yeah. Fact checkers, stay away. Fact checkers be gone. It's my sense that Pfizer has been a major driver in what appear to me to be broad-based corrupt actions across all Western governments. The harmonization of the propaganda and censorship and other initiatives, the contracts that were executed in the European Parliament and across the world with governments. My intuition is that we have very active collusion, in particular between Pfizer and the Five Eyes intelligence community. Five Eyes being Great Britain, U.S., Canada, New Zealand, and Australia, which appear to have been the most egregious in the authoritarian practices that have been deployed, and obviously are tied together. There are all kinds of breadcrumbs having to do with that. That said, Moderna is a product of the CIA. Moderna was created by DARPA. The new RNA manufacturing plant in Canada was capitalized by In-Q-Tel. that the involvement in the intelligence community here is deep and broad. And my understanding is that the current CEO of Moderna was involved in the design and build out of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. There are deep, deep roots here in a very small, closed community. And it is interlaced between intelligence interests, the interests of various globalist organizations, and of course, we always like to pick on Klaus Schwab and the WEF, but there's also vertical integration up to the World Health Organization, and from there, of course, we have the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that's, I think, number 2 funder of the WHO now. And then that traces back to the origin of the China solution that is being so actively advocated, the Chinese CCP. I mean, this is a matrix here that is interlaced in a complex, sophisticated way. And I am not optimistic that I think we're going to face a similar situation to those that have tried to disambiguate what happened with the assassination of John F. Kennedy when I was a child. As your friend Tucker Carlson has recently commented on.
Well, I praised him for that. I was texting him the other day and I said, look, like, your coverage of this is incredibly important. And to be able to actually shed light on this, and no one in the United States of America or a democratically elected government should be able to sit there and stand by as the deep state, assassinates a president or runs one of the most nefarious vaccine programs to ever hit the world. People rightly are calling this Nuremberg 2.0. Do you agree with that assessment?
Let's see. How do I say about that? The Reiner Fulmick and Nuremberg 2.0 at times appears to be a bit of a media play. I don't know how we get there from here in the current global political environment. I really think that for the layperson, the easiest way to comprehend what we're dealing with is we have an environment in which, as said by the New York Times, the majority of companies in the United States will soon be controlled by BlackRock. We have this small collection of transnational capital that we could call BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, Bank of America, and their colleagues. And they functionally control pretty much all of the major corporations of the world in all of the verticals, corporate media, banking, IT, everything. And all of these entities function more like divisions of one company. It's the easiest way to comprehend what's going on as far as I'm concerned. If you're willing to concede your personal autonomy and sovereignty to these folks that believe that through social Darwinianism, they have the right to rule the world because they're the richest.
Right.
If you're ready to go there, then they have the solution for you, and they will provide it. And if not, this is it appears to be one of those last moments in time where if you don't want your children to live in a world where they own nothing, and it's all controlled through some central consortium of banks, and economists, now's the time to get active and speak up, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dr. Robert Malone, we appreciate you joining us here on this Bombshell News. We hope that you won't be a stranger and you'll be back soon. Thank you so much for getting up with us and discussing all of this with us. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure, and thanks for the opportunity. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Robert. We appreciate it. A lot of different opinions on this, right? As some people in the chat are saying, Reiner Fulmick and friends on this Nuremberg 2.0 are taking people to court over this. And I would like to see, I hope that it is bigger and we do get more answers in court. But you see these documents, you see the immunity clauses, you see these contracts that were drawn up essentially by these federal governments, and they get total carte blanche to do whatever they want. And I think we'll see maybe in some of these court cases, if we are able to get more information. We're certainly seeing in New Zealand the fallout from this and what happened with Jacinda Ardern. So I'm hopeful, and people want to know, like, why is Dr. Fauci not in jail yet? But we might get some answers in Congress when he actually testifies, and that's what.
Well, and I just want to reiterate, like, how I feel like this is, and people don't have to agree with me, but like, if you look at the timeline and when Twitter started supporting free speech and they removed all of the limitations of COVID, and we could start having these conversations about this stuff is starting to fall apart. The narrative is falling apart. Now, the mainstream media is not covering it, but people are sharing it. People are reading it. People are comprehending it and figuring this out. And I feel like, that I do really feel like there is a social revolution happening on Twitter, whether you want to believe that or not. And some of these other, like Rumble, that supports free speech. People want the truth, and it's starting to come out. And I think that that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a slight, start of a little bit of a collapse. Now, hopefully, we've never seen this before. Hopefully somebody will go to jail. But even if they don't, as long as it stops moving forward, it's a win.
I hope so. And, for a lot of people, like we have people here watching in New Zealand, someone says, let's see who says here in New Zealand, Basil Brush on Rumble says, Clayton, it got worse for us in New Zealand, not better. I didn't claim that it got better. I'm just pointing out that Jacinda Ardern leaving, and we'll see. I don't know, and we'll find out here. I think as we start to uncover more of these documents, as we start to see these cushy relationships, the great work of journalists and people at like Project Veritas who are getting answers on all of this. It's not going to be perfect, right? It never is. As we're trying to like get to the heart of all of this, there's going to be messes. My fear in this, though, is that when there's mistakes made along the way, as people are trying to uncover this, that there's some leniency for the people that are doing the digging right now, who are going through these documents and are pulling pieces of information out. Go ahead, Philip.
I was just amazed, though, that like you would think with the current climate and what it's been the past 3 years, like that guy would talk about that to anybody.
Right.
Like the guy from Pfizer, like
couple drinks.
If I had information like that, yeah, I know. It was like I can't imagine getting drunk enough that I would like spill secrets like that in the current climate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That'd be like I don't know, like having footage like that Chelsea Manning had, just release it to somebody at a bar. Oh, check this out! I've got this thing that nobody's supposed to have. It's like it's just.
And he says right at the beginning, he's like, please don't tell anybody about this. Please don't tell anybody about this. So. There are people questioning, of course, the veracity of this guy. And it's very interesting. If you start to see, you could see it almost happening in real time where the internet has been like scrubbed of this guy. Even the Wayback Machine has been removed of this guy. So there was a intense scrubbing going on of this guy at Pfizer. Those are the deep tentacles of Pfizer and all of this, where you even are able to go back to the Wayback Machine and scrub data of this guy's history.
And that generally, when that happens, that kind of tells you that you're onto something. Like if they're doing that, then they're trying to cover it up.
Well, it's like, it always reminds me of like the old cease and desist letters that people used to get in the tech world. Apple used to do this back in the day when leakers would publish like, oh, this is going to be the new iPhone, or this is going to be the new whatever. And they would publish it on social media, and then Apple would send a cease and desist letter. Well, Apple learned, right? You don't send because then it just proves that it's true. It proves that it's accurate. So if you're going through actively trying to scrub this guy from the internet, pretend he doesn't exist, why are they wasting their time on that? Why are they wasting their time? But they had the documents. So anyway, we've got more news to get to on this Thursday. That's not the only story making headlines. We're going to tell you about the CDC and what the CDC has been doing to try to cover up these adverse effects from the vaccines. They've been holding misinformation panels. We'll tell you about that. We've got the Zoom calls to show you coming up a little bit later. We're also going to look at this crazy story. The United Nations is actively looking and working to criminalize speech. And this is a draft proposal right now. And of course, we heard this at the World Economic Forum from the head of the United Nations that this is a plan. Like the government's, we're going to have a United Nations plan to criminalize speech, things that they don't like, social media posts that they find to be misinformation, criminal. So that's from the United Nations. We'll get there. We're also going to look at the war in Ukraine and all of these countries sending tanks to Ukraine. Will it change the tide of the battle, the war at all? Or is this war completely over? And is this going to lead us into a nuclear war as a result? The tensions are ratcheting up. Scott Ritter is going to be joining us in just moments to talk about that. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at Lear Capital, because right now it's no secret. If you've tuned in, then you know experts are predicting a recession. This could be the worst year for the U.S. dollar ever. We're already seeing gold prices tapping out, getting very close to $2,000 an ounce right now. Silver prices, the demand for silver right now is off the charts. So everyone should have some of these precious metals in their portfolio just as a hedge against inflation, as a hedge against the craziness and the failure of fiat currency. Remember, every government currency in world history has collapsed, every one of them. What makes you think the US dollar will be the one that doesn't collapse? They've all collapsed, all of them. So for 4,000 or 5,000 years, gold and silver have sustained. So has real estate as a hedge against these collapses of governments, famines, wars, everything else. So even if you just have a little bit of your family's wealth preserved in gold, in an IRA or a 401k, that's what you can do with Lear Capital. So here's how it works. The 800 number is right there on your screen. It's 1-800-613-3557. And that's the best way. Just give them a call and you'll get their free gold kit. And then when you talk to them, you can receive up to $15,000 in free bonus metals with a qualified purchase. You can also visit their website at learredacted.com. But if you give them a phone call, that's probably the best way, because then they can talk about if you've got like an old IRA sitting around that you left a business or you had it for years and it's not doing anything. Like I had an old IRA that I had left over years ago, and it was just sitting there. And what I did was I converted it to a self-directed IRA, which allowed me to invest in precious metals inside of the account. See, Wall Street doesn't want you to know about that. They don't make any money off of it. They don't get to manage your money when you have total control of your own money in a self-directed account. That's the beauty of self-direction. It's so funny that they try to keep this from you. They try to hide it from you. Like, give a call to Fidelity. Get on the phone with Fidelity and ask them if they have a self-directed account. They'll say, yeah, sure. You say, really? Really? Can I self-direct my own money? Meaning I can buy real estate or gold or silver? And they'll say, well, no, but you can buy stocks. Oh, so you're lying to me, Fidelity? Oh, Charles Schwab, you're lying to me. No, truly self-directed means you have checkbook control of your finances and you get to put whatever you want in there. You can put in gold, silver, other precious metals, copper, anything you want that you control. Anyway, give them a call today, 1-800-613-3557, or go to their website, learredacted.com. That's the place to go. They are fantastic, so our thanks to them. All right, well, the Paul Pelosi truth is about to be exposed. Videos are incoming, my friends. Body cam footage that we've been waiting for. So we're going to talk about the body cam footage, whatever happened on Hammer Time, and also Paul Pelosi's shady stock practices and the Pelosi family stock accounts. We'll get to all of that. And, of course, we'll look at the Pelosi Stock Act. It's all one big sandwich of Pelosi right now in this story. Get out your sandwich of Pelosi.
So big old Pelosi sandwich.
It's like a big pastrami sandwich, a big Pelosi sandwich. So a San Francisco judge has ordered that evidence related to the attack on Paul Pelosi must be released to the public, including police body cam footage. Now, the Fox News was one of the news institutions, along with the Associated Press, that sued to have this footage released. Why the heck would news organizations have to sue in order to get access to body cam footage? It's public. It should be made available to us as taxpayers, right? There should be no reason that body cam footage is not available to us, the taxpayers. We're paying for it after all. So there's no reason it should be kept quiet unless, of course, there's something to hide, right? Why also didn't we see the footage from the DUI arrest of Paul Pelosi? Interesting, right? Why wouldn't we see the body cam footage of Paul Pelosi being attacked with a hammer, right? So a San Francisco judge has ordered this evidence to be turned over, and these news organizations are going through it, and we will see it. We're going to see, I don't know what we're going to see. We're going to see him like literally, naked with a hammer. So
I know one thing we're going to see, something completely different than what we were told.
Yeah. Right. Well, let's unpack that. What were we told, right? So there's two different versions of the story. We heard the local authorities' version of the story, the local district attorney's version of the story, which, remember, when CBS reported this, they got in trouble for it when an NBC reporter covered what the local authorities said happened. He was suspended and his report was taken offline, and NBC said bye-bye to Miguel Almaguer, the reporter.
And he was disappeared for a while. Or was he ever found?
Yeah, he was found, but it was like personal time, but they made him leave, right? He was suspended, right? For what? All he did was report what the district attorney's office said happened, which what they said happened is that when police approached the door was opened by Paul Pelosi himself. That's not what the Department of Justice, though, said. Their version of the story, the DOJ, Biden's Justice Department, had a completely different take on this. Their version of the story was that the two police officers that approached Paul Pelosi's house opened the door. Oh, two different stories. Well, clearly the body cam footage would show us the truth here. So why wouldn't you release it unless you wanted to hide something? So now we'll get to see the true part of the story, which is what the district attorney said happened and what the police officers said happened, which is that when they opened it, Paul Pelosi was there, and this is my friend David. He's standing there with a hammer, with David with his hand on Paul Pelosi's arm. So where did this guy come? Of course, the narrative we heard right in the aftermath of all of this was this guy is a Trump-loving MAGA guy who was there to attack the Pelosis. And the Biden administration ran with this narrative, remember? Remember Joe Biden telling us that this is the problem with America right here. This is the problem with America. People like this, David DePape, who are MAGA Trump supporters and who want to bring down the government, want to attack Nancy Pelosi. Turns out he was a progressive environmental hippie, nudist, illegal immigrant from Canada living in a mobile home. So totally different story than what was told. But we'd love to see what's on this footage to actually get a clear picture of it. It's just amazing that this was kept from us.
Now, is there any chance that when we get the footage, it's like a lot's been redacted? It's been like, are they getting the ability to manipulate the footage at all? Or are they releasing it as it is?
No, it should be completely unredacted. So that's good. That's the goal. And the San Francisco District Attorney's Office also has to release the 911 calls as part of this. So we're going to hear both the audio and the video of this. And on top of that, because there's surveillance footage all around the property, we're going to get to see the home surveillance footage as well. So all of this will be one big Pelosi sandwich of footage that we'll be able to see. The body cam footage, who opened the door, and why, and we'll see, did the Department of Justice lie about that in order to protect Nancy Pelosi and hide what was actually happening here? And we'll see the surveillance video footage of the entire neighborhood. This whole neighborhood has multiple cameras. The house has multiple cameras. Why was that kept from us? And of course, we'll hear the 911 audio calls as well. So, and by the way, the prosecutors, the prosecutors requested to keep it secret. So they were pushing to keep this thing secret. And see, because I believe, their argument here is they would love for David DePape to be just the total bad guy in this, right? He's the bad guy. He should go away for the rest of his life. He attacked Paul Pelosi. End of the story. Don't ask any questions. End of story. Look away. But, if you're the defense, you want to be able to defend this guy and say, no, wait, there's a lot more to this story than the case is allowing for us to show and to a jury. If you want to have an actual trial here, we want to go before a jury. We want to be able to. He should be able to show the evidence that's being used against him. What evidence is there? Why is this stuff being kept from us? So that's one piece of this. We'll see this body cam footage soon, and we'll bring it to you, unredacted, of course, unless there's nudity. And I don't know that any of us wants to see Paul Pelosi naked with a hammer.
No. And what a golden opportunity for Weird Al Yankovic right now. He could do like the bang, bang, Dave DePappy's hammer came down upon his head.
Where is he anyway? He hasn't done any good. He hasn't any good pop references anytime lately.
No, he hasn't. I just gave him one. So sorry, Philip. Go ahead.
There you go. Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, I hope there's no nudity in that, because that means to show it on the show, I'm gonna have to be the one to edit
blur
it. I'll have to blur it out, which means that's just really unfair, man.
You're gonna have to be the one that blurs out the DePappy. So you won't believe what Paul Pelosi just did. This is separate, of course, from the body cam footage. Yes, the same Paul Pelosi that we were just talking about, who was hit in the head with a hammer during the mysterious break-in at his house a few weeks ago, he just sold off millions of dollars of shares of Google, which is an interesting move, of course, because that move happened just 1 month before the Department of Justice announced an antitrust investigation into Alphabet, into the parent company of Google. So the same Department of Justice that appears to want to protect the Pelosi's by making up a fake story about what happened at their house launched an antitrust investigation into Google. So it's amazing that Paul Pelosi had the wherewithal to sell his shares of Google a few weeks before this investigation. Like, he's an amazing stock picker, isn't he? He really is. He's such a good stock investor. There he is, along with his lovely wife. So here are some of the transactions you can see. This is the periodic transaction report. You can see Alphabet. All of these sales. Pelosi reported the sale of stock in 3 different transactions between December 20th and December 28th. So it's amazing, right? Here he is recovering from a hammer to the head. But he still has the wherewithal to ditch some stocks after Nancy Pelosi lets him know that, hey, Department of Justice about to do something here. So you might want to dump some of these stocks. The periodic transaction report shows the involved sale of 10,000 shares on December 28th, December 20th, 10,000 shares, and notes that each transaction involved an amount between 500,000 and 1 million and yielded capital gains of more than 200. Although it's unclear how large the profit was taken together, the trades involved 30,000 shares and between $1.5 million and $3 million of assets. It's almost like he has some kind of insider information that the Biden administration is going to do something that could affect his stocks.
Well, and how long before all of this was he in that car accident? Because it wasn't like a DUI. Wasn't that just like
over the summer? Yeah, I think it was over the summer. Yeah.
And that supposedly there was somebody that is secret that was in the car with him at that time too. Wonder if that was Mr. DePappy.
Well, and that's the rumor. And then we also, of course, don't have the footage, the body cam footage from that arrest.
Whoops.
It's amazing, right? It's really amazing. And it's really disgusting, of course, when you see how this whole thing operates, this deep state operates, and you wonder, there's one government for you and there's one government for them, isn't it? The Pelosi family is very good at trading stocks, though. It's like they have some secret information. In fact, there is a Twitter account devoted to tracking Nancy Pelosi's stock picks. Here it is. It's the Nancy Pelosi Stock Tracker. I encourage you all to follow it because, you does a very good job of showing you what Nancy Pelosi's picks are. Members of Congress have been getting rich off of insider trading for years. Here's how it works. A congressman goes into a private committee hearing about some impending pandemic. They walk out the door, they call up their stockbroker, and they sell tens of thousands of shares in companies that are going to go belly up as a result of a pandemic. And
buy stock in Pfizer and Moderna.
Right. Exactly. So then they do the reverse, right? The reverse of that is true. They're inside a committee hearing and they learn of the same thing, that they were about to send billions of dollars to big tech or to defense contractors or whatever. So they go and they buy stocks in Northrop Grumman and
it's like, let's short Johnson & Johnson and go hard in Moderna and Pfizer.
Yeah. So you have access to all of these committee hearings. You have access to information that none of us have. So Senator Josh Hawley introduced a bill this week called the Pelosi Act. I love the name of it, by the way. It's such a punch in the nuts to Pelosi. The Pelosi Act. That's what it's called, which forbids members of Congress from trading individual stocks. Watch Josh explain this.
My next guest is vowing to put an end to insider trading, public corruption in the swamp in Washington, D.C., with a bill that he calls the Pelosi Act. Here with more, Missouri Senator Josh Hawley is with us. Senator, tell us about this bill.
Well, listen, Tony, you've laid it out perfectly, which is that when people send, when the voters send members of Congress to Washington, they expect them to do the people's business, not to be day trading on the stock market, not to be using the information that they get from briefings to go and make a quick buck on Wall Street. So here's what my bill does. It says no more trading of stocks by members of Congress. In fact, no more ownership of stocks by members of Congress. If you want to save, fine, put it in a mutual fund like most Americans do. But Nancy Pelosi is the perfect example of what should not be happening in D.C., which is people getting rich on the stock market off of information they know because they're a member of Congress.
Yeah, and that's the point, right? That they're getting this information. They're getting this behind-the-scenes information in committee hearings and otherwise. They know. They're in the halls of Washington. They know what's coming from the administration. And certainly Nancy Pelosi is the most powerful, is the argued she's more powerful than Kamala Harris. And she's getting information as the former Speaker of the House.
Well, then how in the world does somebody like her become a 100 millionaire in her
time in Congress,
career in the Senate or whatever?
Well,
she became a 100 millionaire since she was
looking at it. You're looking at it. You're looking at it. That's exactly right there. The Nancy Pelosi stock tracker. That's how you figure it out right there. All of those moves, all of the money that she's of course made off of her relationships with like the CHIPS Act last year, right? I mean, here she was. The Pelosi family stock transactions have attracted scrutiny, of course, over the summer when we were talking about this. Prior to Congress's passage of the CHIP Act, was ultimately signed into law, provided $52 billion to boost domestic computer chip production. Paul Pelosi bought between 1 million and 5 million in shares of NVIDIA. And then, of course, she flies to Taiwan, and one of her meetings is with PA Semiconductor, Taiwan Semiconductor, right? So she's literally there on the country's dollar, meeting with her investing team.
Which is it's so funny too, because you hear the far left tax the rich. We need to go after these big corporations, and they turn a blind eye to that stuff, to these people that are enriching themselves off of their money. Right. That just makes zero sense to me.
So Matt Gaetz, Congressman Matt Gaetz, says, look, we have information. We are members of Congress. We have information that other people do not have. That's why this should be illegal. Watch.
I do not believe that members of Congress should trade individual stocks. Yeah. We have information that other people do not, and we have the ability to impact how various companies do based on the types of programs we authorize or that we pull.
So we'll see.
Well, we're gonna just think about. I just want to bring up one thing that I always bring up is that when the Waldorf Astoria lobbied Congress knew that was going to pass. And they knew that a lot of these mom and pop shops were not going to be able to retrofit their hotels with this mandatory sprinkler system in a hotel. So they knew that all these places were going to go out of business, and they knew which ones would survive and do well, because they would default to being the ones that are making the money. So they do things like that. They can make laws that do things so they have they can just do whatever they want to make that stuff happen, to make themselves money. It's like having your own slot machine.
Yeah, and that's how all these guys have made millions of dollars while they've been in government, right? Because they know what's coming, and they're able to jump ahead or get out of something before it crashes, unlike you and me. Why it's all a cabal, and it's why it's a stacked deck is what it is. So we'll have more on that story. We'll continue to watch, and we'll see what this body cam footage reveals. We will share that story. We've got more news to get to. We're going to look. Scott Ritter is going to be joining us in just a moment here to talk about the latest in Ukraine, specifically on these tanks and what this will mean for the war. Is this a massive escalation? And where does Russia go next with this? Is NATO pretty much creating a death wish for Europe? That's really what we're seeing right now. We're also going to look at the United Nations criminalizing free speech. And some major moves, draft notices from the United Nations. And we're going to look at the CDC misinformation panel. So we've got a lot more to get to. But first, I want to tell you about VPN and private internet access. So look, every day I'm using private internet access to be able to do this show. Without private internet access, I wouldn't be able to visit news websites that are blocked because governments don't want you to have certain information. And also, streaming services based on your location don't want you to have streaming options. Like, oh, if you're in this country, you can't stream this show? Really? But I pay for the service, so why can't I have access to this? That's garbage, right? But even more than that, like government censorship, you mean to tell me that I can't access a website because I'm in a country? No, screw you. Just like people like France, for instance, wanted Rumble to block our content in France because they didn't like some of the content that, free speech platform on Rumble in France. So Rumble said, screw you. We're just going to pull our content then from Rumble. So there's a lot of people watching us in France right now because you know why? They use a VPN. And one way you can do that is with private internet access. It's a leading VPN provider that works with all major streaming services so that you can access more content than ever before anywhere in the world. All you have to do is connect to a server and you're good to go. It's really all that easy. Private internet access offers fast servers in over 80 countries and every United state. That's right. Plus, the VPN is really user-friendly, super easy to use. Their apps are available for all devices, smart TVs included. And one subscription can be used on up to 10 devices at one time. So if you've got an Apple TV or a Roku or a smart TV and you want to use it on your PC, your laptop, your iPad, you can use it anywhere, all of those devices. So, there's people who, like, if you want to watch a certain show, like, you might not be able to watch it. I have friends who, like, love watching some stuff in Japan. And you can't get it if you're like in another country, not Japan. Like, what if you want to watch some stuff through Netflix or other, and you can't get it because you're in a different country? It's ridiculous. So I personally love using private internet access. I have it on my Mac. I watch stuff all over the world. I love watching stuff out of Asia, and you can too. It's really, really simple. So. What I love is the simplicity of it and the peace of mind. So here's what you're going to get: 83% off, an 83% discount right now. If you want to enjoy all the benefits of private internet access, now is the time to subscribe. Head over to piavpn.com. It's right there on your screen. the letter P, iavpn.com/redacted. piavpn.com/redacted. Get 83% discount. Seriously. That's just $2 a month. You also get 4 extra months completely free, but you must go to that URL, piavpn.com/redacted. Once again, piavpn.com/redacted. Well, Germany and the United States yesterday announced plans to send tanks to Ukraine. The United States with Abrams tanks, Germany with Leopard 2 tanks, Poland also announcing it's sending Leopard tanks to Ukraine yesterday. And this morning, we learned that Portugal announced it's sending tanks to Ukraine, a country that I didn't even know had any tanks. Russia says that Europe is now expanding the target for this war, and Russia will see these as potential targets going forward. Have we just escalated things beyond where they were before? Scott Ritter is a former UN weapons inspector. He knows a thing or two about weapons and their implications, and he joins us on the show. Scott, great to have you back.
Thanks for having me.
So last week on the show, you said something that I thought was incredibly important, and I've been thinking about it all week, which is the more weapons we send to Ukraine, the more weapons NATO sends to Ukraine, the weaker it makes Ukraine, both in terms of manpower and, of course, opening it up for further attack. You see this amplification, these additional tanks that are being sent as vindication of your message, or is now Ukraine suddenly going to win this war?
Well, Ukraine's not going to win this war. They're definitely not going to win it with 14 Leopard 2 tanks, A6 variants that Germany claims it's going to provide by the end of March, early April. 14 more Leopard A2 tanks that Poland's going to provide. Between 30 and 50 Abrams tanks, which aren't going to show up on the battlefield till the end of this year or early next year, or any other tanks that are going to be provided. The fact of the matter is, these tanks aren't game changers. The Ukrainians have been trained to fight in Soviet-era tanks, T-72s, and their own T-64 updates, 3-person crews. They're inheriting tanks right now. They're going to receive tanks that have 4-person crews. Why? Because you have to manually load these tanks. So automatically, the whole concept of putting a crew in a tank and employing the tank is fundamentally changed. And if you haven't trained on this, if you haven't practiced on it, you're just getting into a system. It's like, if I brought you a Formula One car and you've never trained on high-speed driving, and I said, Clayton, take her for a spin.
Right.
You would be like a little old grandma. And they're, because you have no clue what you're doing. You don't know how to handle this piece of machinery. That's going to be the Ukrainians with this equipment. It takes 22 weeks to train an M1 Abrams crew member. I would imagine that the Leopard 2 tank is equally as complex a piece of equipment. And so Germany is going to provide 14 of these tanks in 10 weeks time. So even if the Ukrainians were getting training right now, when they receive the tanks, they're not going to be trained on it, let alone know how to what to do with 14 tanks. If anybody thinks 14 tanks is a game changer, you have no clue what modern war is. These 14 tanks will be chewed up if they ever arrive on the battlefield. But the likelihood of all 14 arriving is slim to none because of the maintenance problems of these tanks. This is one of the things we talked about previously about the different infantry fighting vehicles that were being provided in the maintenance nightmare they presented. For the M1 Abrams tank, under ideal circumstances, for every hour of operation, you need 3 hours of maintenance. And that's with American crews that are actually trained, dedicated military occupation specialties of guys who go through the schools. They know how to do this, and they have the entire system backing them up. In the United States system, we'll have the tank company up front, and behind it is this huge system ready to back it up. With the Ukrainians, we're going to put an M1 Abrams tank company out front, and then there's going to be this thin little umbilical cord that goes back because there will be no direct support. If the tank breaks, it has to be removed from the battlefield, taken back to a place where it can be repaired. It's going to be very difficult for this tank to appear on the battlefield because the Russians right now are a little irritated, and they're going to put everything they have into interdicting these weapons before they get to the battlefield. But let's say they get to the battlefield and they break. That just means they have to run the gauntlet one more time to get fixed and then run the gauntlet again to come back. Every time you do that, you're setting up Ukrainians to die. And this is all that's going to happen. These weapons will have no meaningful impact. Just a news flash for NATO and all the NAFO fellas out there that are sort of cheerleading right now that this is a great thing. For the last 20 years, NATO and the United States have been focused singularly on Afghanistan and the Middle East. The last thing they've been doing is preparing for large-scale ground combat in Europe. The Russians have been preparing for large-scale ground combat in Europe since 2008. In 2016, they fundamentally reworked their organizational structures, and they're continuing to update them today for the sole purpose of closing with and destroying a NATO-style army. That doesn't just mean how NATO fights doctrinally, but the equipment. Every piece of Russian equipment that's in the Russian inventory today has been designed and is intended to kill NATO tanks. So if people think that the Leopard 2 showing up on the battlefield is suddenly going to scare the Russians, you're wrong. They're ready for it, they've trained for it, and they have the equipment to deal death and destruction. And for the Germans, I just don't know what's going through their brains.
Yeah.
The idea of putting German tanks on Ukrainian soil for the purpose of killing Russians. Man, that didn't work out too good the last time they did it, and it's not going to work out too good this time.
Yeah, it seems like instead of going the opposite direction and moving towards peace, we're doubling down on this. Now, Russia, of course, amplifying its rhetoric over the past 24 hours and saying, this is an extension now of the targets, right? You're now opening up the targets. This isn't just the Ukrainian battlefield now. This gives, I mean, you can speak to that a little bit, what you're hearing from Russia now, that you're sort of expanding the battlefield beyond just Ukraine. We're now actively looking at, you have Portugal announcing these tanks are going to be delivered through Spain. They're actively telling us how on rail lines they're going to be delivering these tanks through Spain. So they're going to be coming from Poland and all of these different locations. What do you make of that side from the Russian side of this now?
Well, first of all, we have to understand that the Ukrainian defense minister last month just straight out said that Ukraine is a de facto member of NATO. That the Ukrainian army is a proxy NATO force, and that Ukraine's willing to sacrifice its blood, but it must receive the equipment from NATO in order to carry out these tasks. So by his own definition, which then was, you could say, well, that's just an irresponsible, over-enthusiastic Ukrainian official. Then you back it up with the meeting of the Ramstein Contact Group on January 20th, where all of the defense ministers of NATO and other nations who aren't NATO, like Sweden and Finland and such, got together and, without exception, articulated a similar, theory of their involvement, that this is about a NATO war with Russia. The German foreign minister just said it straight up to her European colleagues. Germany is at war with Russia. Let's be clear. Russia has every legal right to attack any place in Europe that is involved in the transfer of these weapons to Ukraine. By agreeing to transfer these weapons to Ukraine, every nation that has said, yes, this is what we're going to do, has become an active participant in the conflict. And under the laws of war, Russia can take them out. Now, here's the good news. Russia is simply putting a marker down and saying, you've just increased our target deck. We can do this. But Russia has been managing escalation from the very beginning. And the last thing Russia wants is to turn this into not just a de facto, but a de jure conflict between NATO and Russia, because now it's nuclear war and it's over. So I don't see, at least in this iteration, Russia reaching out and touching Polish logistics centers, German railheads, Spanish tunnels. I don't see that happening because Russia doesn't need to do that. Russia's winning this war, hands down, and Russia's going to win this war, hands down. But Russia is letting NATO know that if by some strange set of occurrences, all this equipment showed up in Ukraine, and the Ukrainians were able to assemble a mailed fist that threatened Crimea or anything else, that it's game, set, over. I mean, Russia will open up and unleash everything they have on NATO, because NATO is an active participant in this conflict. And again, if you take a look at Russian nuclear doctrine, one of the conditions for the use of nuclear weapons is if NATO or a NATO-like entity assembles sufficient conventional military power that threatens the existential survival of Russia. So what NATO is seeking to do, they're not going to accomplish it, but what they're seeking to do is give Ukraine the ability to act as a NATO proxy to threaten the existential survival of Russia, which means Russia, if this actually occurred, would use nuclear weapons, not on Ukraine. They've said it straight up. This isn't going to be a tactical nuclear weapon against Ukraine. They're going to hit NATO. They're going to hit London. They're going to hit Berlin. They're going to hit Paris. They're going to hit Brussels. They're going to hit Madrid. They're going to hit Lisbon. Hey, Portugal, good job. You just made yourself a nuclear target. This is the reality. Now, the good news is Russia's winning this war, and they're going to win this war. Russia's ready for this. They're prepared for this. But politically, this is an escalation. And imagine, put yourself in Russia's shoes. What NATO is saying is they want to kill Russians. They want to kill Russians. This isn't some mathematical game with tanks and steel and all this kind of stuff. It's not a computer game. This is reality. Now, I've said that what all they're doing is actually enabling Russia to slaughter more Ukrainians. That's the truth. But let's say that, because the blade of war cuts both ways. That's just the harsh reality of it. That the same blade you'd use to kill somebody is cutting you. And let's say Russia gets away with a 10-to-1 casualty ratio. That's a fantastic ratio, almost impossible to achieve, but they're doing that now. But let's say the new tanks come in and Russia sustains this, and they kill 40,000 Ukrainian troops, which is what's going to happen. Russia's going to lose 4,000 dead. That's 4,000 mothers, 4,000 wives, 4,000 daughters, 4,000 sisters, 4,000 grandmothers and uncles and brothers and sons that are going to lose loved ones. This is unforgivable, literally unforgivable. And remember, this isn't a war that was provoked. It's not an unprovoked act of aggression by Russia. This is something that has been planned by NATO since 2008 when they invited Ukraine to join, something that has been perpetrated by NATO since 2014 when Angela Merkel and Hollande, the French president, conspired with Petro Poroshenko, the Ukrainian president, to use the Minsk Accords as a shield to buy time to build up this NATO proxy army for the purpose of killing Russians. This has been going on since the spring of 2022. We now have the Ukrainian head of intelligence saying the peace agreement that Russia was sitting down in Istanbul to sign with Ukraine that Boris Johnson killed, it was a sham too. It was never going to happen. It was designed to buy time to do what? To kill Russians. To kill Russians. That's all this is about. And Lloyd Austin has admitted that when he came out in May of last year and he spoke in Warsaw and he said, we need to bring pain to Russia. Well, pain is a cute little word. It means death. It means dead Russians. It means suffering. And, you know, for NATO, the United States, Germany, Portugal, and all others to act on this desire can only generate hate on the part of the Russians. And Europe better pray that the Russians turn out to be a forgiving nation, because what Europe is doing right now is unforgivable.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Scott Ritter, former UN weapons inspector, whose words have been incredibly poignant over the past couple of weeks. We really appreciate you joining us. Thank you for your analysis and insight. And hopefully cooler heads will prevail in Europe. Otherwise, they're going to get us all killed at the end of the day. Scott, great to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
As Neil in our chat just says, absolute scumbags. Yeah, they are. Absolute. And, you know, they're controlling the battlefield right now. They control the future. Lockheed Martin just yesterday saying it's ready with their F-16s. And now Ukraine is saying we want F-16s. Who's going to man that? You can just hop into an F-16? These guys who have never flown an aircraft? I mean, these people are delusional.
They can just watch Top Gun a couple times and they're good to go. Right?
They're good to go.
It's all right
play
there.
Play Afterburner on Sega Genesis and you're good to go.
Or watch that presentation that I can't remember if it was MSNBC where they did the war games. You know, watch that.
Yeah, you'll be good to go. Yeah, it was Meet the Press. Yeah, it was Meet the Press.
Press.
Play a
About
Microsoft Flight Simulator. Yeah, you'll be good to go. I mean, how does this end at this point? Does this end with? I'll just ask all of you. Do you think that NATO and NATO countries, after all of these sanctions, all of the weapons, all of the money, all of the corruption that they've poured into Ukraine, they're just going to stop? Say, okay, we're done. Okay, Donbass is now under full Russian control. We're just going to stop. We're going to stop lobbing missiles. We're going to stop with the F-16s. We're going to stop with the tanks. We're done. We're just going to go home now. I mean, you have the protests all over Paris, all over Germany. There's a big anti-war rally in the United States. So maybe the people will move the world to get them out of there. But I don't know how this ends. I mean, it either ends with NATO saying we're done, we're going home, we're picking up our ball and going home, or it ends with Russia cleaning the floor with NATO. What's the middle ground here?
I don't see the U.S. getting out of it as long as we can continually make the money back that we're giving to Ukraine by selling them our weapons.
Oh, it's been great.
As long as that's going on.
It's been great for the United States. It's been great for not the United States people. It's been great for the military-industrial complex. It's been great for natural gas providers, right? So now we're able to sell natural gas to Germany after we blow up their pipeline at 4 times the cost of what they were paying for it before the pipeline was blown up. This is brilliant.
Well, and the fact that there's zero accountability, there's nothing telling us where or who this money is going to. I guarantee there's some personal pocket padding going on as well. It's not just military industrial complex. Like these people that are pushing it, they're paid advertisers. So why are you pushing it so hard? Because you're getting something out of it.
Well, and a source told me something very fascinating today about an individual in Ukraine. I won't name names. Because this was an off-the-record conversation, but very interesting because the person who happens to be in the United States but is also travels to Ukraine on a regular basis gets to live lavishly, basically, and is just getting $1 million checks deposited in their account. Where does that money come from? Oh, just use your imagination where that money comes from, and the palatial palace that you get to live in Ukraine that has a pool with your nice cars. Where's that money coming from? Yeah, you know where it's coming from. Unbelievable. So what's next? Someone says, Welsh22, thank you for your super chat. Welsh32 and on YouTube says, what's next? NATO sending Ukraine Apache helicopters? Who knows? Well, we're just cleaning out whatever we have at this point. But Lockheed Martin's like, hey, we're ready. You want F-16s, Zelensky? We got them. I don't care if they blow up the moment we send them, as long as you're paying for them. The moment they arrive, they will be destroyed. Just like any of these tanks that arrive in Ukraine will be destroyed. They're going to be rubble. They're going to be molten lava in a few minutes after they arrive there. Why are we wasting our time, money, and more importantly, human lives with all of this? It's really disgusting. It's really disgusting. All right, we've got more news to get to here on this Thursday. We're going to talk about the United Nations move to criminalize misinformation, speech, blocking speech, and telling you what you say and what you can't say, and sending you to jail if you say what the United Nations doesn't like. We were warned about this at the World Economic Forum when we heard from the head of the United Nations speaking at the World Economic Forum, but now they're already putting a pen to paper, and we now have a draft from the United Nations on this. We're also going to look at the CDC funding the American Board of Internal Medicine. This is the same group, by the way, that is actively trying to take away the medical license of Dr. Peter McCullough, trying to strip him and defame him and discredit him and take away his medical license. This very same body funded by the CDC, holding panels on misinformation and how best to basically hide the vaccine adverse effects from people. When people ask us about it, how should we frame the answers so as to, not want to spread misinformation as they describe it? So we'll talk about that. For all of that, though, we're going to go over to Rumble, a censorship-free platform. By the way, Rumble has been under attack, under denial of service attacks. Do we yet know who's been attacking Rumble? What is it? Is it some sort of
isn't that
NGO?
Obvious at this point? It has to be obvious at this point that it's Russia. I mean, it's always Russia.
It's Putin, right?
Yeah, it's Putin's Rumble hike.
It's Putin's
yeah, but no, they've not said. But it just goes to show you. I mean, when you're dealing with big tech, the fortunate thing is Rumble has their own servers and everything, but the problem is, like, some of the servers, no matter where you have them, you have to have like server houses and stuff. So you probably have to use some from different companies, but they do work very hard to have their own in-house stuff. So I think that's probably, that's probably harder than we think.
Yeah. So denial of service attacks against Rumble, trying to stop them from being an open and free platform. Censorship free. So we are going to move over to Rumble right now. We're going to continue the live stream like we do there every night so that you get the full live stream unaffected. But there are certain things we really just do not feel like we can attack. We can go forward and hit with a hammer on YouTube because they will block, censor, ban us over there. So there's just certain things that YouTube still will not allow us to say. So we like to use YouTube in order to drive you over to Rumble. Like, come on over. It's nicer over there. Free of censorship. Again, rumble.com/redacted is the place to go. Our stream will continue there right now. So we've got about 20,000 of you watching right now on Rumble. Come on over. Let's push it up to 40,000 tonight on Rumble if we can, because there's 27,000 of you watching on YouTube right now. So if all of you just open up your smartphone, go over to Rumble, download the app. It's free, or on your smart TV, or on your Roku box, your Apple TV. There's apps for Rumble on almost every platform, I think. Samsung, they were working on one for Samsung. Do we know if they got that one for the Samsung TV yet? Do we have an update on that?
Yeah. Well, the Samsung TV is just a browser. Like, you just got to open the browser on the Samsung TV, and you can go to rumble.com, sign in, and all that. So that's just normal. Okay. But they have like Roku. There's an Apple TV app that's really good. So most of the major platforms have a Rumble app. Okay. But again, most smart TVs have a browser, so you should be able to open it.
And Rumble just had a big interface update about a week and a half ago, or 2 weeks ago, and it looks a lot better. They've really sped things up. So
Discovery is a lot better too. Like, you can go in and along the top you can see things you're interested in, and it's all broken up by categories and topics and stuff. It's really good.
Yeah, so come on over and subscribe to us there on Rumble. Again, rumble.com/redacted. We are going to say goodbye to our YouTube audience now, so come on over to Rumble if you would be so kind. We're going to continue the live stream there. So bye, YouTube. Much love to all of you guys.